Hey, what's going on, y'all? This is LaToria, and we are here again for another episode of Soul Care Sessions. I got my sis Dieula with me again, and we
Yes.
are going to get it in. Say hey to the people, Dieula. Say
Hey,
hey.
everybody. It's good to be with you once again.
Yes, what's up, y'all? We're excited to be here with you, and today's topic is going to be about grief. And so, like always, we'll just kind of jump right in. But before we dive too deep, Dieula, for the people that this is their first time listening and they may not be aware of who you are and what you do, can you introduce yourself to the
Yeah.
peoples?
Yeah, no problem. So my name is Dieula Previlon. I am a licensed professional counselor. I'm an ordained minister as well. I'm the mother of 3 young adult sons, one who's getting ready to be out of college.
Hey.
Yes, ma'am. Hallelujah. Praise Jesus. Yes. And I have two others that are at Prairie View. They're twins, and they're finishing their third semester in college. So their second year, and they just finished their first semester in their second year. Married 22 years, and the work of racial trauma and grief and suffering is a work that I love to do. I love integrating our faith, my faith, with counseling strategies. I think the Bible and the Christian faith has so much to say about our mental health, emotional health, and it speaks so much into that. And so I love integrating the two to help us experience a healing that is holistic, So that's what I love to do.
Absolutely. Well, we're excited to have you and always thankful for your wisdom and insight to help us get our lives, sis, because
Yes,
we
yes,
need you out here in these streets right
yes,
about now.
yes.
So you working with the right combination. So let's jump into it. I know last time we talked about trauma and racial trauma. So can you help us kind of understand the difference between trauma and grief and how they kind of may work together?
Yeah, yeah. So trauma, is really this overarching picture of something that happens, an event that happens that just overwhelms our system. It just takes
Right.
over our mind, body, and soul. Many people will recover without too much issues from trauma. Many people will not. It will develop into post-traumatic stress disorder, and many people can remember PTSD. So a lot of people will develop PTSD. Sometimes when people develop PTSD, grief is a part of that, right? Grief is a part of the symptoms or what you get out of PTSD. And when people have PTSD, sometimes they have sleep disturbances, sometimes there's anxiety, sometimes there's depression, and sometimes you'll have this long-standing grief that happens. And grief is basically talking about, grief is basically you dealing with a kind of loss that you have had. And so you're grieving a loss. Your soul is just in anguish because of a loss that you've had.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So I guess in that same vein, what would you say collective grief would look like and feel like, namely for African Americans and just kind of some of the things that we historically all the way up until today
Yeah.
have kind of shared.
Yeah. So we have personal grief, personal losses that cause us to grieve. So grief is the response to loss. And losses can be a number of things. You lose your job, you lose your community, you lose what the life you thought you would have. I have many young adults and young people or people who thought they would be mothers or wives or whatnot. They're grieving that loss, right? So there's a number of things people grieve. And sometimes when people are grieving, they tell themselves, why am I grieving this loss? It's not even that big of a deal, like But for me, all losses are valuable, are important to grieve, right? There's no such thing as one that's bigger or less. It's just grief. It's
Yeah.
just a loss that needs to be grieved. When we talk about collective grief, though, it's a loss that we all experience together. It's a loss that we can all resonate with together. It's a loss that I know you will feel. I know when the community loses this thing, we all kind of speak the same language. We all deal with this loss together. And so when there's this loss together, there is this grief together as well, right?
Yeah.
And so when we're online sharing RIP, for George Floyd or Breonna Taylor, or
Right.
we're all kind of resonating with that. Many people looking from the outside might not understand that this is our way of grieving when we post it online, when we share it online, and another sister is saying, yes, I resonate with that. Yes, it's us collectively drawing the community to grieve together, which social media, I think, is a blessing in this sense, because now we can see that we're not alone in our grief. The community joins us in these losses. And then, you talked about historical trauma, historical grief even. We have this collective history together of losses, of things that we have lost, all the way back from Africa, how we kept losing one loss after another. And then it's compounded. And if it's not dealt with, if it's not embraced, if we are not aware of it, we just keep stuffing it down more and more. And before we know it, we're fine. We're okay. We're strong. We're these people who never grieve. We have to grieve. We have to name it. We have to express it. We have to, and in grief, sometimes there are different emotions that come out of grief. There's the anger, there's the sadness, there's the anxiety, there's the denial, there's all of these symptoms that come out of grief that we collectively have to come to terms with. When someone dies or when there's a loss, the natural and normal response is to grieve. Is to cry, is to feel lost, is to feel sad, is to feel depression, is to feel, all those things are normal. But many people, especially if you grow up in the church, people will give you these one-liners, that, it's don't grieve, God will handle it, or, all that, everything will be all okay. All things work together for the good to those who love the Lord. All great scriptures, all great things, but we need to allow people the time and space to grieve a loss.
Absolutely. That's so well said. And Lord help us.
Yeah.
I really, at some point kind of want to take some time to kind of do research and read and just try to figure out, like, how did we get to that point where we're so quick to, like, encourage ourselves not to feel.
Yeah.
Well,
I think part of it is that it's painful.
Yeah.
It's painful. And sometimes when we are hurting and we're grieving and we go to a brother or sister to help comfort us, we don't find the comfort. So what we learn over time is that it is not okay to grieve. It is not okay to cry or to allow ourselves to express our losses and grief, because there's no help, there's no comfort. But the reality is, Black people, we have a community that's already built in, where if we are strategic, if we allow each other the space and time, we can do some pretty good grieving in support of one another while we're grieving losses, right?
Yeah, that's
And it's
true.
so interesting because the culture we're from, the African cultures we're from, I was just in Uganda in January. Well, not just in Uganda. It feels like I was there 3 years ago, but it was really in January.
Girl, 2020 been so long.
It's
I'm
been
like,
so long.
Jesus. We've
It's
been
been
in this
so
year for
long.
5
It was
years.
in January, but January felt like 3 years ago. But I was in Uganda and we were doing a session on grief. And I asked the women, tell me, how do you grieve in your community? And one after another, the women would show up and say, you know, in our community, we would wear black for like a year. In our community, we would do these ceremonies for 30 days, 60 days. In our community, we would do this and that. And then I came back home and I was sharing this with an African-American older woman. She was in her late 50s. And I was telling her what I learned in Uganda. She says, oh yes, in the African-American tradition, when people would die, they would wear black for a certain amount of time. They would do these things for like days and months. And I'm like, where is this? How have we lost this thing where people in our communities, we're not allowing people space and time.
Yes.
So what I've learned in these cultures, in these conversations, in the African cultures, in the older African American cultures, even, is time. We need time. There's a kind of loss that we can't get over overnight.
Right.
We need time. And I think people get uncomfortable when they see us not happy and not joyful and that we're grieving, or if we're wearing black, or if we're honoring the loss of so-and-so. There's a woman in my denomination, every Sunday, you know, they're doing this thing by highlighting the lives that are lost, that have been taken by police brutality. So every Sunday. So even though we've moved on from George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all these people, every Sunday she's honoring another name and another name whose life has been taken by police brutality.
Wow.
So it's like, it's her way of saying, I'm still grieving.
Yes.
I ain't done yet. And that's okay. And I think the thing is with the American culture is that oftentimes we want one or the other, right? We, you know, it's either we're happy or either we're sad. The reality is we will find joy, pain, suffering, and grief sometimes right next to each other. We just need to create space for grief in our life. I tell many of my clients, have a relationship with grief.
Wow.
Don't treat grief as if it's the boogie monster or the boogeyman in the closet and the lights are off and late at night it comes to haunt you. Treat grief, turn on the light on grief, right? Turn on the light on it and invite grief in, rather than you waiting for it to scare you like, oh my gosh, this thing is about to scare me. No.
Wow.
Invite it in, have a relationship with it, and you dictate, you know, how long each day do you want to create time for grief in your life? Because I do believe grief can teach us lessons. I do believe it can teach us lessons about ourselves. So if we're always against grieving or not wanting to grieve, we won't get these key lessons that we need for us to move on. The last thing I'll say is many women that I've talked to about grief is that they're scared to grieve because they're afraid of opening that door to grief, because once they open it, they're afraid they won't be able to close it.
Yo, I was literally about to say that to you, sis. Like, I've never heard anybody say like welcome grief, like turn on the light and like embrace it. And I'll be the first to say, just in full transparency, I'm hesitant to even think about doing that for the exact reason that you said, like the fear of it consuming me and I won't be able to function
Yep.
handle
Yep.
my adult everyday life responsibilities because I'm so consumed by
Yep.
this feeling.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be all consuming. If
Mm-hmm.
we create time every day,
Yeah.
if we create time, if we allow it to, if we allow ourselves to have a different relationship with it, it doesn't have to be all consuming. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have to take us out of work. It doesn't have to, but we have to create space for it in our lives.
That's so good.
Yeah.
That's such a huge nugget, man.
Yeah.
Um, what would you say are like the stages of grief?
Yeah. I mean, stages of grief, I think, there's been
Or like
some.
maybe, I'm sorry, maybe if it's not necessarily stages, if there's like a cycle to it to some
Yeah,
degree.
I think there are some cycles. I think, American theorists have written a lot about the different stages and things like that. I don't know if it goes into stages as much as our relationship with grief changes over time,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
So
Okay.
in the beginning, it's heavy and it's strong. You can't function. You can't even figure out how to live the next day, in
Yeah.
the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard, And then as time goes by, you find yourself more and more capable of handling the grief.
Mm.
And then, in different parts of the grief or in different seasons with your grief, you might find yourself, the sadness, the denial. We had a traumatic loss in our family, and it's been a year. We're still not over denial,
Wow.
and it's not denial that it didn't happen. It's like, I can't believe this happened
Yeah.
to us, to
Yeah.
our family, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's not, and then there's the shock, the mere shock. It's been a year.
Yeah.
We're still shocked
Yeah.
by what happened in our family. We
Mm-hmm.
lost a 20-year-old, through gun violence,
Wow.
and it's been a year. We're still shocked. So when we talk about stages, it's not really stages because you find yourself cycling back around through these earlier stages that a lot of people say it,
Mm-hmm.
happens in the early time,
Sure.
and you find
Yeah.
yourself recycling back through them. But what happens is our relationship with the shock is different.
Got
Our
you.
relationship with the denial is different. Our relationship with the sadness is different,
Mm-hmm.
but we still go through it. So some common signs or parts of grief are the shock, the denial, the existential questions. Why am I here?
Mm-hmm.
If there's loss, if there's, so we ask ourselves a lot of questions about our belonging and our existence, and
Yeah.
then there's the questions for God, which is very common, like,
Yeah.
God, where are you?
Mm-hmm.
And this is very real and necessary. It's like
Right.
lamenting. While
Yes.
you're in grief, there is this aspect of you that is lamenting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then in the grief as well, I think there's this other part where you find this new strength, new energy for not wasting time. I don't know what you call that, but then all of a sudden you're like, listen, especially for people who are grieving losses of family members or different people in their lives,
Yeah.
there's this energy that happens because you're like, life is short.
Right.
I better get on the ball. I better
Yeah.
do something with my life. I better stop, putting this thing off that I've been wanting to do for years. This grief is teaching me. Remember, I said lessons. This grief is
Yeah.
teaching me to not waste time. There was someone who said, I think it was Lapita, who said something about Chadwick Boseman when he died, that his wife shared something about, take your time, but not too much time, or something like that, dealing with
Yeah.
time. Because that's when you realize that time is precious. And
Mm.
we should not waste it. And so there are lots of lessons and lots of parts, but I think there are even parts of grief that you might notice for yourself that
Sure.
another person doesn't notice, that, is a part of their grief process. And what I say to that is allow the uniqueness of your grief process to just be.
Sure.
There are some things we'll have in common. There are some things we might not have in common,
Mm-hmm.
depending of the grief that you're experiencing. But the other part is the whole healing component of grief is the
Mm-hmm.
community.
Yeah.
Community is so key. I don't know how people do individualized grief though. I think there is a part for where people need time and space, but there's also this time for us to joining with the community and just grieve with the community. Allow people to come over, allow people to do your dishes and wash your
Yeah.
clothes and cook food, because that's how we do it in my community. When somebody's dead, it's like a whole community gathering. There's food,
Wow.
there's drinks, there's money being brought over, there's taking care of responsibilities, there's taking care
Yeah.
of the grocery, just the community coming to fully support.
Right. That's
Mhm.
beautiful. That's
Yeah, it is.
beautiful.
It is.
And I'm sure that within itself is healing too, just
It
to kind of have
is.
that togetherness.
It is. It is.
Wow.
And that's what I pray for our listeners, that if there's a loss or a grief, however big or small,
Right.
that you will have some form of community or someone that can resonate and say, I got you.
Yeah.
You're not going to do this grieving thing alone. That if you call someone, they'll say, oh, yeah, and they'll give you space, and they will not,
Mm.
tell you to stuff it down, or don't talk like that. Oh, you need to get over this already. No, none of that. I hope you don't
Yeah.
get those responses. I hope you get people who allow you to share and allow
Mm-hmm.
you the space to grieve, and that you're not this foreign entity who's grieving too much or too long, or
Right.
sometimes people say things that are very insensitive when you're grieving.
It's so true. And it's so unfortunate. I think
It is.
we're groomed in this culture that is go, 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 fast, fast, fast. And it's applied to everything. And it's like, that's not even natural
Mm-mm, mm-mm.
to quickly get over losing someone that you love. Or
Exactly.
even if it's like a collective grief kind of situation, like George Floyd or Rihanna. Like there's so
Yeah.
much that triggers for us each time, we see an unarmed Black man or woman be gunned down by police.
Yeah,
We go
yeah. I
through a
mean,
whole
even
process. It's like a
it
whole thing.
is. It's a whole thing. I mean, to this day, I still have not seen the whole George Floyd video.
Me either,
you
sis.
know
Me
and
either.
and I think that's still a part of me that's grieving that loss,
Hmm.
and I can't bring myself to watching it, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's my way of grieving. It's my
Hmm.
way of just paying respect to his life that was
Right.
taken, and
Yeah.
so it's still deep in my heart. And
Yeah.
then, like, what's her name, who who died in Texas, woman. She was about to take a job at Prairie View.
Sandra
Black
Bland.
Sandra Bland.
Yeah.
So they renamed the street for her. So every time
Wow.
we bring our boys, we drop our boys off to school, there's this grief that
Yeah.
happens in my heart. It's like
That
these
one
collective, yeah,
that one hit different for me, sis,
yeah,
because I saw me in her.
yeah,
Like, it's like, yo, that could have been me easy on a bad day.
yep,
Or if I'm cramping
mm-hmm,
and my mood swings all over the place,
yep,
and you pull me over something that I think is some foolishness, like
yep,
that could have easily been me.
exactly,
Her passions were
exactly.
my passions. Like,
Exactly.
it's crazy.
Exactly. Every time I pull up the street to drop my boys off, it's like my heart just sinks.
Lord.
It's still there. I think there's a grief. Sometimes we think we should get over these types of losses, I don't know if there's such a thing as getting over it. I don't know if we should get over things like that. I think, again, our relationship with the initial shock might lessen, but the pain of how this loss happened is still there, you know?
Right. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, so with thinking about grief, what would you say are some ways to kind of implement self-care during that season of grief? I know that when I was in counseling, like um, my counselor, one of the things she said was you've got to be gentle with yourself. You know, and that concept was and is still really new to me as a Black woman growing up, raised by primarily Black women. Like, other than like a bubble bath, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's a concept that I'm still really trying to grasp and understand. And I think because we don't really see, or it's not as common, I'll say for myself, to a certain degree in society, we don't really see what it looks like as a Black woman to really like be gentle with yourself. Or even just the ways that we internalize things. I'll speak for me and say the level of expectation that I put on myself. You know? So what is some insight that you can bring in just into that concept of being gentle with yourself, or just general self-care while grieving?
I think that's so kind. Being gentle with yourself, having grace for yourself, not gaslighting yourself, you know, like, you know, telling yourself, oh, you ain't grieving, really, what's wrong with you? Or, you know, that's not that big of a deal. We talk ourselves out of self-care, right? Because we think we should be these strong people who don't necessarily need self-care, because self-care is for the weak. No, self-care is for humans.
Absolutely.
To be human is to need self-care, right? And so it's things like that. And I think it's important to pay attention to what exactly you're needing, you know, like, and not talking yourself out of those needs, like, you know, and being present with what you're needing, you know, being present with yourself. You know, if today, you know, I'm feeling angry, giving yourself time to be angry. When can you exactly express your emotions without anyone telling you you shouldn't be that way? When can you express your emotions, you know, without people, you know, telling you that is not biblical or it's not Christian-like to do? So being present with yourself, being present with your needs, being present with your emotions, being present with just exactly what what exactly you're needing. The other thing is, I literally had to make a list of people that I can call when I'm in need, because when I grieve, you know, my brain takes over and I can't think of anyone. And all of a sudden, you know, my situation is like all or nothing. I have no one that cares. I have no one that supports me. I have no one, then this and that. You know, our brains start playing tricks on us. So for me, I knew that pattern of myself in
That's real, sis.
those days. I had to make a list. I'm like, okay, when these bad days happen, these are the people you can call.
Right.
And I would literally open up my phone in the notes section and look at the names of people I can call and say, hey, I need some help and support today.
That's so smart. To know yourself, to be self-aware to that level where you set yourself up for success. Because you know something gonna pop off. That's gonna trigger you and send you off into the deep end. That's dope.
It's going to happen. And so I had to literally do that for my own care, for my own survival, because I needed the community, but I didn't know how to reach out to the community. That's the other thing. Speak your needs to your friends.
Wow.
Tell your people around you what it is that you're needing. Tell them,
Yeah.
you know, I know our culture, you know, we celebrate independency. We
Mm-hmm.
celebrate, you know, being able to do things on your own and not needing anyone else, right?
Yeah.
That's not biblical. You know,
Mm.
that is
Help
not
us,
of
sis. Help
God.
us.
That is not of God. All over the Bible, we see an interdependency. You
Yeah.
know, through the Trinity, you see this
Mm.
interdependency through just relationships and how Jesus had relationship on earth with his disciples and women and other people. There's this interdependency. We need people to survive. We
Yeah.
are hardwired for relationships. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, from the garden where God says it is not good for the humans to be alone. He wasn't
Right.
talking about marriage because marriage
Right.
wasn't there at that moment. He's talking about relationships,
Yeah.
relationships, us needing one another. But our society does not give medals for people who need others. They give medals for people who can be first.
Mm.
Um, the kingdom of God is turned upside down. You know, we have this upside down kingdom of God that is
Yeah.
different from our world and how
Mm-hmm.
our world sees it. God gives medals for those who are able to see the value in relationship, in otherness, in belonging with one another. So it's really important for us to be able to call a friend, to name your needs and desires. And then there's these other tangible things you can do during your season of grief and loss, you know, going for a walk, because you will go through seasons of depression where you don't feel like getting out of bed,
Yeah.
you know, you don't feel like going for a walk, you don't feel like waking up in the morning. Those
Mm-hmm.
are times you have to literally talk yourself into getting up, taking a shower, going for a
Yes.
walk, having a meal, drinking water, um,
Yeah.
you know, exercising, all those things, you know, taking a long bath. All those things are necessary to help us in our seasons of grief. Yeah,
Mm. That's
yeah,
good. That's
yeah.
good. What do you feel like the importance of maybe disconnecting from some things like TV or social media, or even, hey, certain people, like where do you feel the importance lies, with that when it comes
Yeah.
to grief?
Yeah, you know, when people have lost traumatic losses, and I know if there's anyone watching who has lost someone very close, they will get this one. When you've had a traumatic loss, it puts you in a different category.
Mm.
It puts you in a different group altogether. And so there are some friends who will no longer be able to understand you. And naturally, some of those friendships will cut off, they'll fizzle away,
Sure.
just by nature of what you've been through, because what you've been through, you can't remain the same. And
Yeah.
that's what I say about, you know, losses, you know, whether it be loss of a person, loss of a relationship, loss of a job, there's a lesson it's teaching you, and you're no longer the same. And
Wow.
because you're no longer the same, there are things in your life that will change as well, including relationships. So there are some relationships that will not go with you in this new way of you seeing yourself, in this newness of you, right?
Sure.
There are some relationships that will end. There are some TV shows that you won't be able to watch. You know, there are some things that will change as you're grieving, as you're going through this loss. Though, you know, I don't know if there's any rules about don't watch too much TV or less TV. It's all based on you. Some people can watch TV, some people can't. You know, for
Mhm.
me, initially, right after my nephew passed, I couldn't watch TV that much. You know,
Yeah.
I just couldn't find pleasure. It's almost like when there's a traumatic loss that happens, I always tell people it's like your creativity is stagnated. You know, you can't think creatively right away. If you used to be a writer, you can't write right away. If you used to sing, you got to take a moment. You know, if you used to do certain things, you just need a moment. And then if you used to see in color, you can't see color. You know, it's like the world is black and white. And that's what happens in grief. And that's normal. And that's okay. And you have to respond. If you can't write poetry, give yourself time. If you can't sing, give yourself time. If you can't rap, give yourself time. Don't try to paint a picture when you have no inspiration. Right now, what the hour is asking for is for you to sit on down with your grief.
Yeah. Come on, sis. Normalizing grief.
That's it. Sit
It
down.
sounds like it's so important for us to do, especially right now.
Yes.
Just thinking about what are the tools that we need to recover from all that 2020 has brought us.
Ooh. Let me tell you, this season has taught me how it is to pay attention to what I need.
Wow. Same.
Like,
same.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Listen, if I can't run a marathon, I ain't gonna try. Like, I'm tired.
Tired. I need a nap.
Yes.
Like several naps.
Several naps. I can't write this book. I can't write this blog. I can't write this thing. You know, I'm not going to try to be nobody's superhero. This season has taught me to listen to my body.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
And to respond to what it's saying. And to be okay with that.
It's so good. And it's, you know, one of the things that I hope to get out of our conversations and the time that we spend together is giving the women that are listening permission. Because sometimes it's a subconscious thing. We've been subconsciously told that we're not supposed to grieve and express trauma and, like, you know, deal with so we just suppress, and we mishandle ourselves.
Yeah.
But I hope that over time and over listening to these dialogues, that these women, like myself, will embrace having permission to take care of myself, to take care of my psyche and my soul, right? My will, my mind, my emotions, like all of those things are tied into this.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you say? How does faith, you know, our hope in Christ, play a role when dealing with grief?
I really don't know how people who don't know Christ
do it. How do you do this?
How do you do this? Because there is such a spiritual, a sacredness.
Yeah.
A sacred thing that happens in the midst of grief, and it's very higher power-ish.
Right.
It's supernatural.
Yes.
It's not of ourselves. So I don't know how people can see the grief journey and go through the grief journey and not experience God in the grief journey.
Right.
You know, because he's so present in the journey, you know. When no one else gets it, it's like there's this overwhelming presence of the Spirit of God with you in that journey. And so I say it not even to chide those who don't know Christ, but I know there is a presence in that. So I want to know, what do they call that presence that's with them? Because I know that presence is with them too, even though they don't know Christ, or they haven't verbalized the awareness of Christ in their lives. There is that presence. As a therapist, I know people who don't even know Christ are aware that there was a presence with me in my grief season. They're not calling it Jesus or the Holy Spirit or anything like that, but I know there's a presence. Right? And so knowing Christ, having a relationship with Christ,
Mm.
it just becomes, during the grief season, there's this intimacy you have with Christ, because you know that presence that's with you is the God that you've been praising and worshiping forever. And now he shows up in this moment of your greatest need.
It's so good.
It's like, no one else can touch that space. No one else
Yeah.
can even get deep in that space. But
Right.
Christ is there in the middle of the night, in the deeper longing of your heart that you dare not share with anyone else. And even in your lament, when you're so mad at God and ticked off at God, and church folks are telling you, don't talk to God like that. And God is saying, talk to me like that.
Yes. He can handle it.
I can handle it. I'm not fragile. I'm
There's so
not
much
fragile
freedom in
like
that.
them others, okay?
Yes.
Speak to me. I can handle it. This is our relationship. Don't worry about these other folks. So there is this beautiful interaction that happens with God in the midst of loss.
Yeah. Yeah. That's real
Yeah,
talk.
it is.
I was speaking with this lady, Abdi, and she was talking about how the shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept,
Mm-hmm.
and just the reality that he's God in the flesh, but
Yes.
he still took time to grieve.
Yep, that's right.
And when she was just sharing how the Lord showed her that something so simple, like my mind just was like, because it's
Yes.
like he demonstrated grief.
Yes.
He demonstrated entering in and mourning with those who mourn. So
Yes.
it's like we serve a God who values and understands the importance, like you were saying earlier, of taking time to grieve.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? Like
Yes.
Lazarus, he knew what was going to happen with Lazarus and what the
Mm-hmm.
end was going to be, but he still took that time
Yes.
to actually grieve. And I was like, man, that's super powerful. And for, women on the call who are still navigating faith and trying to figure out how you feel, like, please hit me up. I'm so open to having that discussion and dialogue. If you got questions, hopefully I got answers. If I don't have the answer, I'll tell you, sis, I don't know, but I'll find the answer for you. But I will tell you, I can definitely co-sign on everything that Dieula is saying, that when it matters the most, and loss and just trauma and the things that this life can bring, having that presence and knowing and understanding who and what that presence is such a gift.
Yeah.
And nothing else can compare to it. So if
Nothing else.
you're trying to tap in, holla at me, sis. I'll help you tap in, because
That's right.
we need it. We need it.
Yes.
Man, I have so many questions, but I'm trying to condense. I'm trying to condense, sis.
Yes.
Well, okay. So what are important tips, just general tips to keep in mind when someone is dealing with grief?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when someone is dealing with grief, there are some do's and don'ts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of the don'ts is don't over spiritualize their grieving.
Yes.
God meant this to happen for this reason. Don't explain it. Don't even try to explain it. We get ourselves in a whole lot of trouble when we become this theologian,
oh, Lord,
without a degree.
Right.
And we trying to explain somebody's grief away. Don't do that.
That's real.
That's one of the areas I've seen people been hurt the most is and then some people they mean well, but then there's ways they discount, discredit, not value your loss, your grief, however big or small. Notice I name all the grief, from losing a relationship, losing a job, losing an opportunity.
Yeah.
That all of those things are valuable to God. and he weeps with us. It's not, you know, too great or too small, or God does not have time for me in this small situation. Yes, he does. He has time for that, you know. And so don't over spiritualize. Don't be a jerk. Don't be insensitive, you know, when the person is grieving. You know, don't rush them through their grief season, their grief moments. You know, don't tell them that, you know, God wanted them to be an angel, you know. Like, don't say those things.
Yeah.
Don't say those things, you know. And I've said the scripture that Christians love, all things work together for the good. When somebody is hurting,
Yeah. They
you
don't want to
can't
hear
see
that.
the good in that moment, you know, and they don't need to hear that. But some good things you can do, you know, is be present. Be present with people. Show up. I can't tell you how healing just showing up is.
Sis.
Just show up.
I gotta attest to that because I remember being a senior in high school and my favorite uncle in the world passed away. He was just this larger than life character. He came to all my basketball games and he was like yelling at the referees and just like, he didn't know nothing about basketball, but he loved me and was going to show up and support, and everybody loved him. He was this huge character. He passed away. Like I think my freshman year in college, and so many people that I thought would show up didn't.
Wow.
And it really rocked me. It devastated me for a season because it was just like, so when he was alive, you know, you enjoyed his presence and, you know, like you were all in his face and all of these things, but then like he dies and you don't show up. Like it really jacked with me. And so in that season, you know, I made a decision for myself that I was going to take very seriously in the word when it talks about mourning with those who mourn. And if you are my friend, if you're somebody that I cut for, somebody that I care about, whether I knew your loved one or not, if I can show up, I'm going to show up. Because I knew how much it hurt for people that I thought, you know, cared about my uncle, or me enough to show up, and they didn't. You know what I'm saying? So I could just attest to what you're saying and how important it is. And it's so rewarding to be on the other side when people don't expect you to show up to their loved one's funeral, and then they're like, yo, you came.
Yeah.
Huge.
It's huge. That's ministry right there. The ministry of just showing up. You know, of showing up for those that are hurting. I couldn't say it any better.
Man, that's such a good point. I'm so glad that you said that.
Yeah.
I feel like I could talk to you forever.
I know. So
good. But so as we wrap up, as always, if there are women out there that are listening and they want to connect with you or follow you on social media, or maybe even they're considering counseling and they want to connect with you on that level, how can they follow you? How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, you know, the main place to find me is on my website. You can find all my information there. And that is DieulaPrevilon.com, DieulaPrevilon.com. And so it'll reroute you to all my social media and everything else.
Oh, that's so awesome. I'm so looking forward to our next conversation next month, sis. It's going to be a good one. I already know. I feel it. We're just going to go deeper and deeper and deeper. Help our sisters out, you know?
That's right.
So ladies, if you have any thoughts, comments, frustrations, prayer requests, any of those things, please hit me up, email me. I'm waiting to hear from you. You can find me or you can contact me at latoriawilson@fca.org. This conversation is brought to you on behalf of FCA. Please know that we're right here with you in the South Dallas area. We love you. We're here to support you and care for you in any way that we can. So holler at us. And until next time, we'll talk to y'all.
Talk to you later. Bye.